A millionaire is mocked for falling in love with a homeless woman, but fate takes a turn that surprises everyone. The sound of Miranda Rivers' expensive heels echoed through the corridors of the Empire Media Group as she hurried towards the boardroom. Her mischievous smile betrayed her satisfaction at finally getting what she wanted. Her niece Autumn was officially dead to the world. 5 blocks away, Wesley Parker was adjusting his Hermes tie in front of the mirror in his office at Parker Enterprises. The view from the 45th floor offered a privileged view of Manhattan, but his eyes were fixed on the newspaper on his desk. Parker Enterprises surpasses Empire Media in market value. It was his greatest professional achievement so far, but something was still missing from his perfectly organized life. "Mr. Parker, the shareholder meeting starts in 5 minutes," his assistant announced over the intercom. Wesley sighed, picking up his Italian leather briefcase. At 39, he had built a tech empire from scratch, but the people around him seemed more interested in his net worth than in who he really was. On the icy sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, Autumn Rivers was preparing for yet another presentation. Her fingers, protected by worn fingerless gloves, slid across the violin as she watched the crowd hurry by. Few knew that this instrument was the only heirloom she had managed to save on the night she had to fake her own death. The melody that emerged from her violin was her own composition, filled with a sadness that made even the most sensitive pedestrians slow down. His threadbare coat hid a posture that revealed years of privileged education, and his green eyes, although tired, held a glint of determination. Wesley left the building after yet another tedious meeting, determined to walk to his next appointment rather than use the limousine. That's when the music hit him precise, the motive notes that seemed out of place in the urban landscape. His steps led him to Autumn. She wasn't like the other street performers he used to see. There was something in her expression, in the way she carried herself, that was at odds with her current appearance. Their gazes met for a brief moment, and Wesley felt something he couldn't explain. "Is this your composition?" he asked, surprising himself by taking the initiative. Autumn hesitated, her fingers pausing momentarily on the strings. "Yes," she answered simply, studying the man in front of her cautiously. She recognized him instantly. Wesley Parker was often featured in the same business magazines that used to print the face of her uncle, Harrison Rivers, the man who had ordered her death. "It's extraordinary," Wesley commented, putting a few notes into the violin case. "You should be playing in large concert halls, not on the streets." A bitter smile crossed Autumn's lips. "Sometimes the streets are the safest place to be." The enigmatic answer intrigued Wesley. Before he could continue the conversation, his phone vibrated, another reminder of his endless obligations. "I'll be here tomorrow," Autumn said, surprising them both with the voluntary information. Same time. Over the next few weeks, Wesley began to alter his routine to pass Fifth Avenue at the same time. Each conversation with Autumn revealed layers of mystery and intelligence that fascinated him more and more. She spoke of classical music with the propriety of someone who had studied at the best schools, quoted literature with natural ease, and demonstrated a deep knowledge of the financial market that she claimed to have acquired by watching people. The meetings did not go unnoticed. Soon, gossip began to circulate at Manhattan social events. Powerful CEO Wesley Parker was often seen chatting with a homeless woman. Discreet giggles and sidelong glances followed him to every charity party. "You're ruining your reputation," warned his vice president, Gregory Martinez, over lunch. "The board is concerned about your association with street elements." But Wesley no longer cared about appearances. There was something in Autumn's story that didn't fit, and he was determined to find out what it was, especially after he saw her react peculiarly when she saw Miranda Rivers drive down the sidewalk in her customized Bentley. What Wesley didn't know was that his growing closeness to Autumn had drawn the wrong kind of attention. Miranda Rivers was watching the news about the CEO in The Mysterious Violinist with growing concern. The resemblance between the street artist and her dead niece was too disturbing to ignore. "We need to sort this out," Miranda told Harrison Rivers, her brother, over the phone. "She's alive, and worse, she's too close to someone with the resources to investigate her disappearance." On the other side of town, Autumn kept her violin in a makeshift shelter, her hands shaking not from the cold, but from fear. She had made a mistake letting Wesley get so close. Her feelings for him were growing every day, but his past was a deadly threat to anyone who got too close. What she hadn't imagined was that Wesley Parker had his own resources and had already begun to discreetly investigate the Rivers empire. The inconsistencies in the company's financial records and the suspicious death of the rightful heiress had piqued his professional curiosity long before his heart got involved. The truth was about to emerge, and with it, a storm that would transform New York's corporate landscape forever. Wesley was about to discover that his heart hadn't just found true love, it had stumbled into a conspiracy that would make the Madoff affair look like child's play. The extraordinary board meeting of Empire Media Group was tense. Miranda Rivers drummed her fingers on the mahogany table as she watched the worried faces of the executives around her. The news about Wesley Parker and the mysterious violinist had spread like wildfire through Manhattan's corridors of power. "We need to make sure that this situation doesn't get out of hand," declared Harrison Rivers, adjusting his gold-framed glasses. "Our position is too delicate to risk any unwanted exposure." On the other side of town, Wesley was in his office, analyzing documents that his private investigator had delivered earlier. The inconsistencies in Empire Media's financial records were greater than he had initially imagined. The supposed death of Autumn Rivers in a yachting accident 5 years ago was surrounded by suspicious circumstances. "Mr. Parker," his assistant interrupted his thoughts through the intercom. "Miss Catherine Maxwell from the Securities and Exchange Commission is on the line." Wesley frowned. Catherine was an old acquaintance, and her calls rarely brought good news. "Catherine, what a pleasant surprise," he replied, keeping his tone casual. "Wesley, we need to talk in person. Something big is about to break involving Empire Media, and from what I'm hearing, you're getting dangerously close to the epicenter." The conversation was brief, but significant. Wesley arranged to meet Catherine the next day at the Gramercy Tavern, one of the few places in Manhattan where they could talk without attracting undue attention. Meanwhile, Autumn was preparing for another performance on Fifth Avenue. The money Wesley generously left her every day had allowed her to rent a small room in the back of a laundromat on the Lower East Side. It wasn't much, but it was better than the shelters where she had to sleep with one eye open. Her new residence also served as a hiding place for the evidence she had managed to gather over the years. Newspaper clippings, documents hastily copied on the night of his escape, and a USB stick containing information that could destroy the empire his uncle and aunt had built on lies and blood. Wesley arrived earlier that day, watching Autumn from afar as she played. There was something different about her posture, a tension that didn't match the softness of the music emerging from her violin. "You look worried today," he commented, approaching her after she had finished her performance. Autumn hesitated, her green eyes studying the face of the man who had unknowingly become both her salvation and her greatest risk. "The streets have eyes, Wesley, and lately, I feel like they're all focused on us. Come and have dinner with me tonight," he suddenly proposed. "I know a discreet place where we can talk without being disturbed." The proposal took Autumn by surprise. Her survival instinct screamed at her to refuse, but something in her heart, something she had been trying to ignore for the last few weeks, made her accept. Wesley's chosen restaurant was a small Italian establishment in the Village, far from the limelight where Manhattan's elite usually circulated. At a table in the back, protected by old screens, Autumn allowed herself to relax for the first time in years. "Why are you really interested in me, Wesley?" she finally asked, after the waiter had poured the wine. "Because you're a mystery that challenges everything I know about people," he answered honestly. "And because the more I find out about you, the more certain I am that you're involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than it seems." Autumn's heart raced. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal, and some lies are too deadly to keep, Wesley retorted, placing a folder of documents on the table. "Like the truth about the accident that supposedly killed the heiress of Empire Media Group 5 years ago." The blood drained from Autumn's face. In her momentary panic, she didn't notice the man discreetly photographing her reaction from across the street to the restaurant window. Hours later, Miranda Rivers was looking at those same photographs on her iPad, her face contorted into a mask of fury. "Joke's over," she told Harrison. "Call our friends. It's time to settle this permanently." Back in her makeshift room, Autumn stared at the violin that had belonged to her mother. Wesley's words echoed in her mind. Along with the folder of documents, he had handed her proof that someone was investigating her past, her accident, her connections to Empire Media. In his Fifth Avenue apartment, Wesley received an anonymous call. "If you know what's good for you, Mr. Parker, stay away from the violinist. Some songs aren't meant to be played." The threat only strengthened his resolve. Wesley began typing an email to Catherine Maxwell, attaching all the documents he had gathered about the case. His finger hovered over the send button when a news notification appeared on his cell phone. Suspicious fire at Lower East Side laundromat. The address made his heart freeze. It was where Autumn lived. Wesley Parker drove his Audi R8 through the congested streets of Manhattan like a man possessed. The address of the burning laundromat flashed in his mind like a neon sign. His heart hammered in his chest as he cut through the traffic, ignoring the angry honks of other drivers. As he reached the Lower East Side, the sirens of fire trucks tore through the night. Orange flames licked the sky, and a crowd of onlookers gathered behind the isolation tapes. Wesley abruptly parked and ran towards the building, his eyes frantically scanning the crowd for Autumn. "Ma'am, you can't go through." A fireman stopped him when he tried to get closer. "There was a woman living in the back," Wesley explained, his voice betraying desperation. "Autumn Rivers. Has anyone seen her?" The fireman quickly consulted his radio before replying, "No victims found so far." The fire started in the back storage area, exactly where Autumn kept her evidence, Wesley thought, feeling an icy chill run down his spine. This was no coincidence. His phone vibrated a message from an unknown number. "Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, 30 minutes. Wesley recognized Autumn's handwriting and breathed a sigh of relief. She was alive. Meanwhile, in the Empire Media Group penthouse, Miranda Rivers was watching the live broadcast of the fire on her laptop, a glass of untouched Bordeaux by her side. "Has the job been cleared?" Harrison asked, entering the office. "Apparently," Miranda replied, closing her laptop, "but our dear niece has always been slippery as an eel. We can't assume anything until we know for sure." In Central Park, Bethesda Fountain was silent at that time of night, illuminated only by the soft light of the historic street lamps. Wesley found Autumn sitting on the edge of the fountain, her violin still pressed against her chest like a shield. "They burned it all down," she said as soon as Wesley approached. 5 years of evidence, reduced to ashes." "Not everything," Wesley replied, taking a seat next to her. "The documents I showed you today? They're copies. The originals are in a safe in my office, along with other interesting discoveries about your family." Autumn turned to face him, her green eyes shining with a mixture of fear and hope. "Why are you doing this, Wesley? Why risk so much for me?" "Because from the first day I saw you, I knew there was something extraordinary about you. And because," he hesitated for a moment, "I think I've fallen in love with the woman behind the mystery." The words hung between them like snowflakes, delicate, but carrying an immense weight. Autumn felt tears burn her eyes. "They'll try to destroy you," she warned. "Miranda and Harrison aren't just greedy, they're psychopaths. They killed my parents, Wesley. The car accident was never an accident. That's why we need to act now," Wesley said, picking up his phone. "Catherine Maxwell from CVS is investigating irregularities at Empire Media. With your testimony and the evidence I've gathered, we can put an end to this once and for all." At that moment, footsteps echoed nearby. Autumn tensed instantly, years of life on the streets having sharpened her survival instincts. "Let's go to my apartment," Wesley suggested. "I have private security and—" "No," Autumn interrupted him. "I have a safer place. Do you trust me?" Wesley nodded without hesitation. 40 minutes later, they entered an old Catholic church in Queens. Sister Marie, an elderly nun with kind eyes, welcomed them at the back door. "Autumn, my dear." The nun hugged her affectionately. "I was worried something had happened. Is the room still available?" Autumn asked. "Always," Sister Marie replied, leading them through silent corridors. In the small room at the back of the church, Autumn finally revealed the whole truth to Wesley. How she discovered the documents that proved the embezzlement of millions in charity funds through Empire Media. How her parents were silenced when they started asking questions. How she herself almost died in the yachting accident, saved only by having decided to swim earlier that morning. But there's something they don't know, Autumn said, opening her violin. Inside the instrument, protected by a secret compartment, was a pin drive. This contains all the original records of the illegal transactions. My father was meticulous about making backups. Wesley took the device carefully, as if holding a bone. "This changes everything," he muttered. A notification sound interrupted the moment. It was a message from Catherine Maxwell, "Search warrant approved for tomorrow. Empire Media doesn't know. Be prepared." Wesley and Autumn exchanged glances. The coming storm promised to change Manhattan's corporate landscape and their lives forever. On the rooftop of Empire Media, Miranda poured herself another glass of wine, unaware that her empire was about to crumble. "Tomorrow will be just another normal day at the office," she told Harrison, who nodded distractedly as he typed a message into his encrypted phone. Fate, however, had other plans. Morning arrived in Manhattan with an electric energy in the air. In the early hours of the day, a fleet of black vehicles from the Securities and Exchange Commission converged silently on the Empire Media Group. Catherine Maxwell, in her impeccable navy suit, led the operation with the precision of a surgeon. "Remember, we're professionals. Keep a low profile until we're inside," she instructed her team over the radio. On the 42nd floor, Miranda Rivers was enjoying her breakfast when her assistant burst into the office, pale as wax. "Ms. Rivers, CVS is in the lobby. They have a warrant." The sound of the porcelain cup shattering on the floor echoed through the room. Miranda immediately picked up her phone, dialing Harrison. The call went straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, at the church in Queens, Wesley and Autumn watched the operation unfold via live news feeds on a laptop. Autumn's face was tense, her hands unconsciously clenching the violin in her lap. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Wesley asked softly, placing his hand over hers. "I spent 5 years hiding, Wesley. 5 years of watching them destroy everything my parents built. Today it ends." Sister Marie entered the room carrying a tray with coffee and toast. "You need to eat. It's going to be a long day." At Empire Media, Catherine Maxwell and her team methodically scoured offices and servers. Years of financial fraud, forged documents, and suspicious transfers were beginning to emerge like corpses in a drained lake. "Ms. Rivers," Catherine said, entering Miranda's office with 2 agents, "we need you to come with us." Miranda maintained her aristocratic posture, even as the handcuffs closed around her wrists. "My lawyers will destroy you. Your lawyers will have enough work trying to explain the $500 million in embezzled funds we've found so far," Catherine replied calmly. On the other side of town, Harrison Rivers was not in his apartment when the agents arrived. His private driver would later reveal that he had taken him to the private heliport in the early hours of the morning. Wesley received a call from his contacts at the FBI. Harrison was seen boarding a private flight to the Cayman Islands. "We're in contact with the local authorities. He's going to try to access the offshore accounts," Autumn said, her face lighting up with a flash of understanding. "The passwords. I know where they are." She opened the violin's secret compartment again, removing a small folded piece of paper. "My father always said that the best place to hide something is in plain sight." Wesley immediately relayed the information to Catherine. In a matter of minutes, the accounts in the Cayman Islands were frozen, closing off Harrison's last escape route. The media exploded with the news. "Media empire under investigation. Heiress presumed dead reappears with evidence of massive fraud," screamed the headlines. Autumn watched with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I wonder how she's taking it," she muttered, more to herself than to Wesley. At the federal police station, Miranda Rivers stared at the wall of the interrogation room, her empire crumbling in real time. When Catherine put an old photo on the table, Autumn as a child, with her parents, something in her eyes changed. "Did you really think you could kill your own family and get away with it?" Catherine asked. "You don't understand," Miranda replied, her mask of arrogance finally cracking. "The empire was going bankrupt. Richard, my brother, was going to reveal everything. He and his perfect wife, with their perfect little daughter. They were going to destroy decades of work." Wesley and Autumn arrived at the CVS office in the early afternoon. Her testimony would be crucial to closing the case once and for all. Before entering the deposition room, she stopped, turning to Wesley. "Regardless of what happens today," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I want you to know that you changed my life, not just for helping me get justice, but for making me believe in love again." Wesley pulled her into a tight hug, ignoring the curious stares of the surrounding agents. "This is just the beginning, Autumn. We have a lifetime ahead of us." Inside the room, Autumn told him everything. Every detail of the conspiracy, every fragment of memory of that terrible night when she lost her parents, every moment of the 5 years living in the shadows. Her voice, once hesitant, gained strength with every word. At the end of the day, Catherine Maxwell made the official announcement. Miranda Rivers was in custody, Harrison Rivers was considered an international fugitive, and Empire Media Group would be put into receivership. When Wesley and Autumn finally left the federal building, night had already fallen over Manhattan. The city lights seemed brighter, as if they were celebrating with them. "Where are we going now?" Autumn asked, entwining her fingers in his. Wesley smiled, pulling her closer. "Home, and this time, you don't have to hide." The rising sun illuminated the rooftop of Wesley's apartment on the Upper East Side, where Autumn watched the city awaken. After weeks of intense testimony and investigations, that morning marked the beginning of a new phase, the first in which she could breathe without fear. "I thought I'd find you here," Wesley said, handing her a cup of coffee. "The New York Times published the full story today." Autumn picked up the paper. On the front page, the photo of Miranda being escorted to federal prison contrasted with an old photograph of the Rivers, their family, before the tragedy. The headline was straightforward: "The Empire of Lies. How Greed and Murder Destroyed a Media Dynasty." "Catherine called earlier," Wesley continued, taking a seat next to her. "Harrison has been located in the Cayman Islands. The extradition should take place in the next few days." A deep sigh escaped Autumn's lips. "It still seems surreal. For 5 years, I lived like a ghost. Now, suddenly, I'm Autumn Rivers again." Wesley's phone vibrated another news notification. Empire Media's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. With Miranda in jail and Harrison facing extradition, the empire built on blood and fraud needed a new direction. "They'll want to talk to you," Wesley said softly. "As the rightful heir, you have the right to know." Autumn interrupted him, her voice firm. "I don't want anything from that empire. It was built on the death of my parents. What I want to do is very different." Wesley watched her curiously as she walked over to her violin, the same instrument that had been her companion and safe during her years on the streets. "Remember the Rivers Foundation for the Arts? It was my parents' project before everything happened. They wanted to create cultural centers in underprivileged areas, to give access to music and art to children who would never have that opportunity. And you want to take that dream back," Wesley added, a smile of understanding lighting up his face. "With the funds that will be recovered from the offshore accounts, we can make it happen. Turn something built with greed into something that really makes a difference." The plan began to take shape that morning. Wesley mobilized his legal team to start the process of creating the new foundation. Autumn, for her part, began contacting her parents' old friends in the art world, people who had drifted away when Miranda and Harrison took over. In the afternoon, they visited an old theater in the Bronx that had closed its doors years before. The place was decaying, but Autumn could see beyond the peeling walls and torn armchairs. "This could be our first center," she said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Imagine, Wesley, music classes, theater, dance, a place where talents don't get lost on the streets, like I almost did." Wesley's cell phone rang again. It was Catherine Maxwell. "You need to turn on the TV now. Miranda is making a statement." In the makeshift office they had set up in Wesley's apartment, they turned on the news. Miranda Rivers, wearing her orange prison uniform, looked like she had aged decades in a few weeks. "I betrayed not only the public's trust," she began, her voice trembling, "but I also destroyed my own family out of greed. Richard and Claire Rivers were extraordinary people who wanted to use our resources to do good, and I killed them for it." Autumn felt tears run down her face as she watched her aunt's confession. Wesley hugged her silently, offering her the support she needed at that moment. "The only thing I ask," Miranda continued, is that my niece Autumn, if she's watching, knows that her father was right. The real legacy is not in the numbers in a bank account, but in the lives we touch. After they turned off the TV, a heavy silence filled the room. Autumn finally stood up, walking over to the window. The city continued its frenetic pace below, oblivious to the drama unfolding. "You know what's ironic?" she finally said. "During all those years on the streets, playing for strangers, I realized that music has the power to touch souls in a way that money never can. Maybe that's what my parents always knew." Wesley moved closer, taking her hands between his. "Then let's make it happen, not just for your parents' legacy, but for all the Autumns out there, just needing a chance." The rest of the day was dedicated to meetings with architects, educators, and artists. The Rivers Foundation for the Arts project was beginning to take shape, transforming the pain of the past into hope for the future. In the evening, back in the penthouse, Autumn picked up her violin. The notes that filled the air no longer carried the melancholy of the days on the streets. It was a melody of new beginnings, of healing, of love found in the most unlikely circumstances. Wesley watched her, amazed not only by her music, but by her strength and ability to turn tragedy into purpose. The empire that Miranda and Harrison had built was in ruins, but from the ashes, something much more valuable was beginning to emerge. The sound of hammers and chainsaws echoed through the old theater in the Bronx as renovations progressed. Autumn was overseeing the transformation of the space, her first project as director of the newly created Rivers Foundation for the Arts. Every wall knocked down seemed to carry with it some of the weight she had been carrying for the past 5 years. "The acoustics in this place are amazing," she commented to the architect in charge, Marcus Chen. "Even with all this demolition, you can hear every note perfectly." To demonstrate, she took the violin out of its case and played a few notes. The sound danced through the space, making the workers stop momentarily to enjoy the improvised music. Wesley was watching the scene from the entrance, a discreet smile on his lips, when his phone vibrated. It was a text message from a blocked number. "Not every secret is out. Search Rivers Archives for Project Phoenix 1992. His countenance changed instantly. Project Phoenix was something that had come up briefly during the investigations, but Miranda and Harrison had refused to talk about it, even after the confessions about the other crimes. "Is something wrong?" Autumn asked, noticing his worried expression. "Maybe," he replied, showing her the message. "Does the name Project Phoenix mean anything to you?" Autumn frowned, putting down her violin. "Vaguely. I remember hearing my parents mention it a few times, always in whispered conversations. They stopped talking when I entered the room." Wesley was already typing on his phone, activating his contacts. "Catherine still has access to the files seized from Empire Media. I'll ask her to look for any mention of this project." The day progressed with a sense of unease. While Autumn continued to supervise the works, Wesley immersed himself in his own investigation. At 3 in the afternoon, Catherine called. "Wesley, you need to see this in person." Her voice betrayed an unusual urgency. "And bring Autumn." At the CVS office, Catherine greeted them with a pile of documents yellowed by time. "This was in a secret vault in the basement of Empire Media. We need experts to open it." The documents told a story that no one expected. Project Phoenix wasn't just a business venture, it was a complex operation involving international money laundering, but with a surprising purpose. "Your father," Catherine explained to Autumn, "was building evidence against a human trafficking cartel. The media empire was just a front for a much larger operation to fight organized crime." Autumn felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Wesley supported her, guiding her to a chair. "Richard Rivers was an FBI informant," Catherine continued. "He used the company's structure to track suspicious financial movements. Miranda and Harrison found out and they killed him before he could expose everything," Autumn added, her voice breaking. "But why my mother too?" "Claire was the real mastermind behind the operation," Catherine replied, passing over more documents. "She had a master's degree in financial data analysis. It was she who created the algorithm that tracked suspicious transactions." Wesley studied the documents with increasing attention. "That explains why the empire collapsed so quickly when we started investigating." It wasn't just about embezzlement, it was about covering up an intelligence operation. Catherine nodded. And there's more. The cartel they were investigating? It's still active. Your parents' death didn't end the operation, it just delayed it. Autumn stood up abruptly and walked over to the window. The afternoon sun bathed Manhattan in golden hues, but she could only see the shadows of the past taking on new contours. All these years, she muttered, I thought it was just about money and power. But my parents, they were heroes. Wesley moved closer, putting his hands on her shoulders. And now we can finish. You carry on with your projects as normal, but keep your eyes and ears open. Any relevant information comes straight to me. The rest of the afternoon was spent organizing a discreet investigation strategy. Wesley activated his private security team to reinforce protection around Autumn and the Foundation's projects. They couldn't risk history repeating itself. Back at the theater in the Bronx, at the end of the day, Autumn watched the workers finish another day of renovations. Her violin rested in its case, as silent as the truths that were still waiting to be discovered. In the end, she said to Wesley, perhaps this is what music and justice have in common. They both require patience, precision, and the courage to face the most difficult notes. Wesley entwined his fingers in hers, watching the sunset through the dusty windows of the theater. And just like in music, sometimes we need to rely on the silence between the notes to find the true meaning. The days that followed the discovery of the Phoenix Project were a roller coaster of emotions for Autumn. While she supervised the Rivers Foundation's work during the day, her nights were spent delving into the archives Catherine had made available, trying to understand the true extent of her parents' work. Wesley found her asleep in her penthouse office, surrounded by old documents and notes. On her laptop screen, a detailed map showed connections between front companies used by the cartel her parents were investigating. Autumn, he whispered gently, touching her shoulder. You need to rest. She woke up startled, her green eyes taking a moment to focus. Wesley, I found something. Look at this. In his trembling hands, a document detailed a series of transactions between an art gallery in Santa Fe and an import company in Miami. The dates coincided with the last records made by her parents before the accident. The gallery still exists, Autumn continued, her voice laden with urgency. And guess what? Miranda was a regular customer. Wesley examined the documents carefully. Do you think the gallery was a money laundering point? Not only that, look at the names of the works sold, their codes. My mother left notes about it. Autumn pulled out another file. Each work of art corresponded to a specific trafficking route. Wesley's phone rang. It was Catherine Maxwell. We need to meet, now, at the usual place. 30 minutes later, they were at the Gramercy Tavern, at a discreet table at the back. Catherine seemed more tense than usual. Harrison Rivers was found dead in his cell in the Cayman Islands, she announced without preamble. Apparently suicide. Autumn felt her blood run cold. Suicide or suicide? Exactly, Catherine replied. And there's more. Miranda is demanding to speak to you, Autumn. She says she has information about the Phoenix Project that she'll only share in person. Wesley immediately protested. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. But Autumn had already made up her mind. I have to go. If there's the slightest chance of finding out the whole truth about my parents. Then let's get this right, Wesley interrupted, picking up his phone. I'll activate my security team. Catherine, we need all the federal support we can get. The meeting with Miranda was scheduled for the next morning at the Federal Detention Center. Autumn stayed up all night, mentally going over all the questions she needed to ask. When she finally sat down in front of her aunt in the prison visiting room, it was like looking into a distorted mirror of the past. Miranda seemed to have aged decades in a few weeks of seclusion. You have her eyes, Miranda said softly. Claire could always see through people. Why did you ask to see me? Autumn asked, keeping her voice steady. Because Harrison is dead, and now I'm the only one who can warn you. They're coming back, Autumn. The cartel never stopped looking for the files your parents gathered. What files? The real reason we killed your parents, Miranda continued, her voice trembling. It wasn't just greed. It was fear. The cartel gave us a choice, them or us. Harrison and I. We chose wrong. Autumn felt hot tears streaming down her face. And now? Now they know you're alive. And more importantly, they know you're investigating. The theater in the Bronx. It's no coincidence that they got approval so quickly for the renovation. They want you close by, observable. On the other side of the observation room glass, Wesley and Catherine exchanged worried glances. The complete files, Miranda continued, leaning forward, are where it all began. Your mother was brilliant. She hid everything in code in the scores of the 1992 benefit concert. The same concert where you met your father. Autumn felt her heart race. The scores, she knew exactly where they were. In the false bottom of her violin, along with other documents she had saved on the night of her escape. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because I chose wrong once. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to stop history from repeating itself. Miranda hesitated. Harrison didn't commit suicide, Autumn. They got to him, and you'll be next if you don't act fast. When they left the prison, the Manhattan sun seemed colder, despite the clear day. Wesley wrapped Autumn in a protective embrace while Catherine coordinated the next steps with her team. We need to get you out of the city, Wesley said. At least until… No, Autumn interrupted him. I'm not running away again. My parents died fighting these people. It's time to finish what they started. Back at the theater in the Bronx, Autumn watched the workers with different eyes, wondering which of them might be cartel informants. Her violin, carrying secrets that had cost her parents their lives, seemed heavier than ever. What do you intend to do? Wesley asked, noticing her distant gaze. Exactly what they don't expect, she replied, a plan forming in her mind. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. Autumn's plan began to take shape during an insomniac night when she and Wesley stayed at the Rivers Foundation office. The sheet music her mother had coded was spread out on the table, each note hiding a deadly secret about the cartel. The opening of the theater, Autumn explained, her fingers tracing the lines on the yellowed paper. It will be our perfect stage. They expect me to play, so we'll give them exactly what they want with a little tweaking. Wesley watched as she worked on the scores, decoding the hidden messages and transcribing them into a language that Catherine and the FBI could use. Each bar revealed a new layer of the cartel's operation routes, names, bank accounts. Your mother was a genius, commented Catherine, who had arrived earlier that morning. Using music theory to encode intelligence information? Brilliant. And the best thing, Autumn continued, is that she used a specific piece, Danse Macabre by Saint-Saëns, a dance of death. The symbolic meaning didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. Wesley approached, placing a protective hand on Autumn's shoulder. The invitations for the opening have already been sent out, he informed her. As we suspected, we've received attendance confirmations from several names that appear in your mother's notes. Catherine nodded, typing quickly on her tablet. My agents are already in place as part of the construction team. We have the theater completely monitored. But Autumn knew it wouldn't be enough. The cartel had managed to reach Harrison in a maximum security prison. They would certainly have eyes and ears everywhere. During the week leading up to the opening, Autumn kept to a meticulously planned routine. She rehearsed at the theater during the day, apparently focused only on the performance. At night, she worked with Wesley and Catherine, refining every detail of the plan. The crucial moment will be during the third movement, she explained during a secret meeting. When the music reaches its climax, the lights will change. On the screens we've installed for the multimedia presentation, the evidence will begin to appear not in code, but explicitly. And you're sure you'll be able to identify everyone involved? Asked Catherine. I've watched these people for 5 years on the streets, Autumn replied, her voice carrying the weight of experience. I know exactly who they are and how they behave when they feel threatened. Wesley, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. What if they try something during the performance? That's exactly what we expect, Catherine replied. We'll have agents at all the exits. More importantly, we'll have federal jurisdiction to act something your parents never got, Autumn. On the eve of the inauguration, Autumn visited her parents' grave for the first time in 5 years. The cemetery was silent in the evening light, and she played a brief tune on her violin, not the coded music, but a simple lullaby her mother used to play. Tomorrow, she whispered to the gravestones, it all ends. Wesley met her there, offering not only his code against the cold, but also his silent strength. "You're not alone in this," he reminded her. Opening night arrived with an electric energy in the air. The theater looked stunning after the renovation, its historic walls contrasting with the state-of-the-art technology strategically installed. New York's elite began to arrive, mingling with the undercover agents and, unknowingly, the cartel members. Backstage, Autumn was getting ready. Her simple black dress concealed a bulletproof vest. Wesley's insistence. Her violin, the same one that carried all the secrets, rested beside her. "All the identified targets are present," Catherine reported through the discreet communicator. "As soon as you start playing, we'll start blocking the exits." Wesley entered the dressing room, his eyes revealing all the concern his words were trying to hide. "There's still time to cancel everything. We can find another way." Autumn stood up, gently touching his face. "My parents died trying to do the right thing the wrong way and hiding in the shadows. It's time to bring everything into the light." The signal sounded, calling her to the stage. Before leaving, she turned to Wesley one last time. "If anything goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," he interrupted her, pulling her into an intense kiss. "But if it does, remember that there's a small army here to protect you." The theater lights dimmed, and Autumn walked to the center of the stage. The audience, a mix of socialites, undercover criminals, and federal agents, applauded politely. She positioned her violin, and the first notes of Danse Macabre filled the air. The music, originally composed to represent death dancing at midnight, never seemed so appropriate. As the melody progressed, Autumn could feel the tension growing in the audience. Some of those present, those who knew the true meaning of the scores, were beginning to show signs of nervousness. The third movement was approaching, and with it, the moment of truth. Autumn closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her, carrying with it not only the coded information, but also 5 years of pain, loss, and determination. It was time for the grand finale. The first notes of the third movement of Danse Macabre echoed through the theater as the LED screens installed on the walls began to display documents, photos, and bank records. The audience, initially mesmerized by Autumn's performance, now stirred restlessly as the evidence of the cartel was revealed. Wesley, positioned near the side exit, watched every movement in the audience. His trained eyes spotted 3 men in the third row who discreetly reached for their jackets. Catherine, on the other side of the theater, had already given the signal for her team to get ready. The music reached its crescendo when the first image of Harrison Rivers, dead in his cell, appeared on the screen. The buzz in the audience increased, and Autumn noticed suspicious movements to her half-closed eyelids. She didn't stop playing. Every note now carried the weight of vengeance and justice. "Everyone in position," Catherine's voice sounded over the comms. Suspicious movement on rows 3, 7, and 12. The first shot came from the upper gallery, missing Autumn by centimeters and shattering one of the LED panels. Chaos ensued instantly. Screams filled the theater as FBI agents emerged from their disguises, guns drawn. Autumn continued playing. Wesley ran towards the stage, but was intercepted by a man he recognized from the cartel photos: Marcus Delacroix, right-hand man of the late Harrison Rivers. The ensuing fight was brutal and fast, with Wesley using his Krav Maga lessons to neutralize his assailant. On stage, Autumn performed the last bars of the song as bullets whizzed through the air. The bulletproof vest under her black dress had proved its worth when a bullet hit her back, but she showed no reaction. The music had to go on. It was the key to everything. "FBI, everybody down." Catherine's voice thundered through the theater's sound system. The screens now showed bank transfers linking cartel front companies to accounts in the Cayman Islands, the same accounts that had been used to order Harrison's death. Autumn's music served as the soundtrack to the fall of a criminal empire. "Autumn, get down!" Wesley shouted as he saw a gunman positioning himself in the main cabin, but she had other plans. With one fluid movement, Autumn spun around, using her violin as a shield. The instrument exploded into shrapnel when the bullet hit it, revealing its secret compartment. Documents flew through the air like macabre confetti, each page containing more evidence of the cartel's involvement. FBI agents moved with surgical precision, neutralizing targets and protecting civilians. Catherine coordinated the operation from the center of the theater, ensuring that no suspect escaped. The exits had been blocked at the exact moment the first evidence appeared on the screens. Wesley finally reached Autumn, pulling her behind a column as more shots echoed through the theater. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes frantically scanning her for injuries. "The violin," she mumbled, looking at the remains of the instrument that had been her companion for so many years. "It was my mother's last present." "But it saved your life," Wesley replied, holding her closer, just as she would have wanted. The shooting lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When silence finally returned to the theater, 19 cartel members were in custody. Among them were 3 high-ranking executives from the former Empire Media who had remained loyal to Miranda and Harrison. Catherine approached the couple, holstering her gun. "It's over," she announced. "We have all the main players. The evidence is irrefutable." Autumn let herself slip to the floor, the adrenaline finally leaving her body. Wesley knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her as she began to cry, not from sadness or fear, but from relief. "Your parents would be proud," he whispered in her ear. The next day, the headlines would explode with the story, "Concert reveals international crime network, Rivers heiress dismantles cartel in historic performance, FBI arrests 19 in spectacular operation at Bronx Theater." Miranda Rivers, in her federal prison cell, read the news with a mixture of remorse and admiration. Her niece had achieved in one night what she and Harrison had feared she would do for decades. In a final gesture of redemption, she had provided the authorities with all the remaining passwords and codes for her cartel operations. Autumn and Wesley watched the sunrise from his rooftop, their hands intertwined. The violin was destroyed, but its purpose had been fulfilled. The scores encoded by Claire Rivers had finally revealed their final melody, a symphony of justice. "What do we do now?" Autumn asked, her head resting on Wesley's shoulder. He smiled, kissing her forehead. Now we start our own music." On the horizon, Manhattan awoke to a new day, unaware of how a single musical performance had changed the course of so many lives. The theater in the Bronx, though scarred by the events of the night before, was ready to fulfill its true purpose to be a beacon of art and hope for the community. The dance macabre was over, but Autumn and Wesley's story was just beginning. A year after the dramatic night at the Bronx Theater, Autumn Rivers adjusted the new Stradivarius violin on her chin. The instrument, a gift from Wesley, carried no deadly secrets inside, only the promise of songs yet to be played. The auditorium of the newly opened Rivers Foundation for the Arts was packed for her first official performance as artistic director. Among the audience, familiar faces stood out. Catherine Maxwell, now head of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, smiled discreetly from the front row. Next to her, Sister Marie, who had offered refuge in the darkest moments, held a concert program with maternal pride. Wesley watched from backstage, his heart racing as it had the first time he saw her play on Fifth Avenue. The last year had been intense. Endless depositions, lawsuits, in the rebuilding not only of the theater, but of their lives. The criminal empire that Miranda and Harrison had protected was completely dismantled. The evidence collected during the operation at the theater led to more than 200 arrests on 3 continents. The cartel, which had operated in the shadows for decades, was finally facing the light of justice. Miranda Rivers, in a last act of redemption, had agreed to testify against her former associates. Her cooperation reduced her sentence, but more importantly, it provided Autumn with something she hadn't expected: answers. The full truth about her parents' death, although painful, brought long-needed closure. The first notes of Vivaldi's Spring filled the auditorium. Autumn had chosen the piece carefully, no longer a dance of death, but a celebration of rebirth, of renewal. Her fingers danced over the strings with the same precision as always, but now free from the weight of secrets. The theater in the Bronx had become more than a cultural center. It was a symbol of transformation, offering free music and arts programs for young people in the community. The same walls that had witnessed that night of violence now echoed with the laughter of children discovering the magic of music. Wesley managed the administrative side of the foundation, using his business experience to ensure its sustainability. But more importantly, he had found a purpose beyond numbers and profits. Watching Autumn work with the students, transmitting not only musical technique but also hope, made him realize that some fortunes could not be measured in dollars. During the intermission of the performance, Autumn ran into Wesley backstage. "I just got a message from Catherine," he said, showing her his phone. "The last lawsuit was dismissed today. Officially, it's over." Autumn let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all those years. "It seems surreal," she murmured, her fingers unconsciously touching the scar on her shoulder, a reminder of the bullet that had destroyed her old violin. "Your parents would be proud," Wesley said softly, adjusting a loose lock of her hair. "Not just for the justice, but for how you turned it all into something positive." The second act of the concert would be special. Autumn had composed an original piece, inspired by her journey. The notes told a story of loss, love, and redemption, but above all of hope. The music, unlike her mother's coded scores, didn't hide secrets, it revealed truths. Among the students present was Lisa, a 12-year-old girl from the Bronx who was very reminiscent of Autumn in her youth. Her natural talent with the violin was evident, but it was her determination that impressed most. Like many there, she found in music a refuge, a form of expression that transcended the difficulties of her reality. When the last notes of Autumn's composition echoed through the auditorium, the audience rose to their feet in a spontaneous ovation. Silent tears streamed down the faces of some, not of sadness, but of recognition. Music had that power to heal, to unite, to transform. After the concert, as the guests dispersed, Wesley took Autumn up to the roof of the theater. The view of Manhattan at night still took her breath away, but now for different reasons. It was no longer a city of shadows and secrets, but of possibilities. "I have something to show you," he said, taking a small envelope out of his pocket. Inside was an old photo, his parents on stage in that same theater, during the benefit concert in 1992. Her mother was holding the violin, the same one that had been destroyed, protecting Autumn, and her father was smiling proudly beside her. "Catherine found it in the FBI files," Wesley explained. "I thought I should keep it for you." Autumn traced the smiling faces with her fingers, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced for years. "You know," she said after a moment, "I think I finally understand why they chose music as a means of fighting evil. Art has the power to illuminate even the darkest places." Wesley hugged her from behind, both of them gazing at the city that had been the scene of so much drama and now so much hope. "And you, my dear violinist," he whispered, "have proved that the most powerful melody is the one played from the heart." The next day, classes at the foundation would start again. New students, new stories, new possibilities. The Rivers media empire had been transformed into something much more valuable, a legacy of art, education, and social transformation. And so, in the city that never sleeps, a new symphony began, not of revenge or justice, but of love, healing, and new beginnings. Autumn Rivers, the heiress who had found her voice through music, was finally home.